Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here to review a movie called Locke. This is a Tom Hardy movie, and at the end of the day, in a lot of ways, people would assume, oh, this is a Tom Hardy movie. There's probably a lot of action in this movie, right? No, there's actually zero action within this film. Um, Reasonably, probably as soon as people understand what this movie is about, it might not be intriguing to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, once I instantly got to know what this movie was, I was instantly like, okay, I definitely need to watch this movie. I love movies like Ryan Reynolds' movie Buried. I really enjoyed the movie that I saw called Wheelman. And so after seeing those two kinds of films and then seeing Locke, where to kind of put the title in my review, Tom Hardy is locked within a car, having to travel a very long distance, all the while his entire life, as he knows it, while he's making this road trip, is completely falling apart. It is such an intriguing way of doing a film where this guy is driving and all the while literally and metaphorically juggling so many things within one really long car drive, on top of him also just talking to himself, ridiculing himself, as if his self is in the back seat, which I just thought was fairly odd. But then again, I could also see, um, I could probably take it apart as maybe that when looking at it, Tom Hardy had two personalities. And the person driving up front is Tom Hardy's character, the father. Like the older, more wiser um, personality, where at the end of the day, he is consistently ridiculing the Tom Hardy personality that's wild and free and is the kid in the back seat that's playing with all his toys and smacking around and whatever and just wild and free, and probably is the reason why this guy is in this big predicament. Um, at the end of the day, it's a father talking to his son, um, kind of giving a lecture, is how I kind of feel, in a metaphorical sense that this is being delivered. Kind of shunning his idiotic self, his kind of willy nilly self, and Willie really does take a part within the story. Um, his literal Willie, let's just say. Anyways, so we have a story completely done from a man's car. So reasonably, you're not going to see anything much besides Tom Hardy and his car. But at the end of the day, the story does have progression. The story does have, um, God, I really enjoy these kinds of movies because you have an entire actor, you have just one actor that absolutely has to sell you this entire movie and has to do it while not having to travel to six different locations to do so. This person is not having to um, jump from motorcycle to sports car to Maserati to this and that, whatever flashy thing. No, this guy is just in a car, and he is trying as best as he can to um, keep his life again from falling apart. And luckily, this guy has been able to um, catch some luck at some portions of this story, but not every portion is 100% all going to just work out in the end. So, that's what kind of makes this an interesting story. Is every single thing that this guy does, is it all, or like, what is the thing that falters? What is the thing that is going to, the one thing that he needs to succeed on, which is a lot of things? What is the one thing that doesn't go right? Will it be his, will it be a relationship? Will it be a friendship? Will it be fatherhood? What is it? That's what I find most intriguing about it is, oh my god, once you start to see him juggling all this stuff, juggling all these phone calls, juggling all, like, that is the one most anticipated thing. Is he going to make all of this stuff work out in the end? He even totes about to himself, ridiculing himself, that he is going to make everything work. Everything is going to come out fine. Um, as he's self-loathing himself. Bizarrely, you kind of see it to where he is consistently looking at the rear view mirror at something, and we have to question what. So, yeah, we have to question, like, what exactly is going on. And how this guy is quite possibly through this road trip losing his effing mind. He is losing his effing mind at the worst time, and he's trying to keep it all together, all while things are falling apart. And yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy journey. I think that's all I can really go out of my way to say, because there's not much other things to put into and talk about this movie besides those points. I really did enjoy this movie, but not everybody will. Because again, once you realize that this is an entire movie about a man who's in a car, how how important will people see that? How will people be interested in the journey? Who knows? So I think it's about that time again to go into spoiler territory about this movie. Because at the end of the day, that's all I can really say about this film. Besides, I actually really enjoyed it. And there might not be a lot of people who did or will be willing to see this. And ultimately, I would just say maybe read the description of the film before you go into it. Because again, there's not much going on in an actual visual sense to continue to provide. Otherwise, Tom Hardy and his car and his journey, his road trip. Um, that's pretty much about it. Everything from a verbal, vocal, whatever standpoint is a lot more. But anyways, so now I think it is about that time for that double five count, because if people want to hear exactly what this movie is, because you might not be interested in watching this movie at all. You just want to hear my voice, anyways. Or at the end of the day, you ultimately will go and see this movie on Netflix. Currently on Netflix now. I don't know if it's always going to be there, but dare say if you eventually see it in the future somewhere, or if you've already had seen this movie and you did not like it, or you did like it, or whatever, at the end of the day, you could stay and see how I overall felt about everything going on in this movie. So, double five time, double five time. So now, I would say for people to go out of their way to watch this movie. But then again, this movie is just kind of one of those films to say that not everybody will like a movie that's just Tom Hardy's face and Tom Hardy in a car. And that's all, folks. That's all. So, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's that time again to spoil this movie. Again, I already mentioned, if you want to hear, stay. But otherwise, get out of hey, because I'm going to be talking about this movie now, in spoiler terms. So, if you guys have seen this movie, so Tom Hardy's character is evidently I'm assuming he is a cementer, or he is a architect that is evidently his job for that important portion of whatever day he's doing is that he has to pour cement. And this cement is the most like highest caliber cement pour that has ever been poured out of cement. And all the while, this guy is driving out of his way to go away from his work to go and see a woman who he barely knows that is delivering his baby. So the worst time in the world for him to professionally leave his job to go to see some baby and see some woman that he barely knows. And all the while, he also has kids and a wife. So I'm like, oh my god, this is gonna go horribly awry. And now I'm invested. Now I'm invested because I'm like, oh my god. And looking and hearing, just hearing the people that are just in just utter just godsmack just because they're like, why is it that you picked today out of all days to do whatever you're doing? And he's like, I have to go. I have to go. I have to do this. I have to. And like this, that's the voice. That's the weirdest. Like, it's very interesting to hear Tom Hardy's voice like sounding that way through the entire movie. And it seems like most of the time you would think his voice would be at a much higher register, so people could definitely hear him throughout the entire movie because he has to talk through the entire movie. But he's always talking like this. He's like, "Hey, how's it going? I'm Locke. How's it going? How are you? Yeah." And I'm just like, one, like, shouldn't you be like yelling at people at some point, somewhere, somehow? But the only time that he raises his voice is either at himself or at one of his cohorts, which he thinks is not doing their job properly. But it's funny how he eventually bails on his job, but his job is like the most important thing, even though there is no guarantee that after he does this job and does it right or does it wherever, if at the end of this movie he even still has a job And yeah, so because that's how crazy this movie gets. It gets to the point where this guy basically pretty much loses everything with the exclusion of whatever new was coming to his life. Because ultimately, he has to mention that this woman that he barely knows is in labor with a child that he might not maybe ever really and truly meet. But I'm assuming uh, Tom Hardy and this woman like reconcile and make a go at this because his wife completely like leaves him or tells him no. It's like once and never is a big difference, and so that's where she kind of throws at him. It's just like no, you're never coming back home. Um, so he's making like a one-way trip to never come home again. And so yeah, so evidently we have Tom Hardy that towards the end of this movie has supposedly lost his job, uh, all the while this job that he has lost, he's going out of his way to make sure that the job goes off without a hitch while he is questionably fired. He is also trying to keep um, his questionably present relationship with his wife and his kids, where his kids are, or his one kid is talking to him about a football game which he is uh, trying to not hear about so he can eventually see the game later or watch it on the radio or something like that, which he can't do because he has so many phone calls crazily going on all at once. Um, all the while, he, while trying to get this cement to be poured, he's talking to this guy that is questionably starting to drink. Because justifiably, why wouldn't you at this point? Um, like everybody's losing their stuff because it's like a one of a kind, once in a lifetime kind of deal, and this guy bowed out at the very last minute. Um, and so you have it to where you have this secondhand man that is taking orders from Tom Hardy from a car, all the while every single important piece of information that this guy could easily have is in the hands of Tom Hardy in his car that he forgot that he had with him. So now like they are kind of like they're scrambling, Tom Hardy's scrambling to tell him all the information that this guy needs to know, all while double checking with every single person that this guy did call them. And when stuff does not work out, he is all of a sudden trying to crazily call the person that could be tied to otherwise get this job to continue going. And so, knowing full well that this person needs to find phone numbers, call whoever he can, and then, man, if they do not have somebody to do this pouring cement job, they have to get some kind of random person at a bar to help them out. Um, so crazy. And so all the while you have this like second in command guy that is otherwise just really starting to drink because he is so just like, God, I didn't think that this was all gonna happen. And Tom Hardy is losing it himself. And ultimately, like the assistant is kind of giving up on this whole thing, and Tom Hardy is just like, "No, you can't just give up. It's like, think about the building, man. Think about all the people that are counting on you, and this and that, and like I'm counting on you, and this like Tom Hardy is really trying to like even threaten this guy when otherwise like dude, he is doing all of this stuff, jumping through all these hoops because of Tom Hardy bailing at the last minute, and this second in command guy is just otherwise just like fuck, like God, this is so much work to do something that I wasn't prepared for doing, and how like this is like a 24/7 job all of a sudden where he has to go and make sure and test everything and double check on things and make sure that certain numbers are put on right and certain things are done and this and that, and all the while Tom Hardy is listening to the voice of his wife or his son, and he is starting to tear up because like his wife is telling him that it's over, and like he's never coming back home. um his son is calling him and telling him about the game, um because it seems like that's the only thing that um they can really uh connect with each other. um that's the only thing that they uh can connect on is just this game. And so ultimately like his son is just kind of like telling him about the game, telling him about who won, telling him about the score and stuff like that. And Tom Hardy is ultimately just kind of understanding where like the last thing that his son kind of tells him is just kind of like, hey, we're gonna treat this football game like that the game that we actually saw never happened, that none of us actually saw this game, and we're gonna treat it all like it never actually happened. And when you come home and we watch this game together, it'll be like today never happened kind of thing. And it's kind of it's very touching, and it's very like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And to reasonably just consistently see Tom Hardy like scramble like a fish, and then in between those times of him scrambling crazily like a fish, like he's also just like chewing the just beating the living like verbal crap out of the man in the back seat, which again I'm assuming is his like maybe inner child, or his just kind of like uh physical or mental thing of just like him whenever he makes mistakes um or does things like cheat on his wife. Like that's that guy in that back seat. um or ultimately Locke, uh the man in the front seat, is a guy that has kind of been the guy that has taken the Locke name to back to promise, because ultimately looking at all the other supposedly people in his family has disgraced his name and ruined it and whatever. So ultimately, um, he's thinking that everything's going to be perfect, everything's going to work out, and even with all of this craziness, everything is going to work out perfectly, and people are just going to like shake his hand and love him and trust him and believe that he is just otherwise just king shit. And at the end of the night, he throws that line to his own boss where like his boss is saying that like, you do realize that I like vomited just just before we talked, and like Tom Hardy like throws at him that is like, you know what, like I didn't realize by the time that I would get into this car that I would have lost um my job, my family, and my home, and like everything, pretty much everything. He kind of mentions everything. Um, I would have never thought that like once I started this car ride that would have lost everything, and so that's kind of how they end that conversation. And like I know I just saw this like minutes ago, and then came on here and rushed in here, and so a lot of this stuff is all just like what I just quickly retained, and so everything is not always gonna all come all at once and this and that. But anyways, that's all I think at this point that I will go into and talk about this movie. Even in a spoiler sense, because at the end of the day, after this is just kind of going after like blow by blow of every little conversation, every little aspect of craziness where this guy had to kind of Tom Hardy's character had to get all these crazy things to get to where like coding and stuff where he had to call these police departments and like licenses and stuff like that, and it's all very wordy and verby and whatever, so I won't go into that. Some of the relationship stuff, won't go into that, but reasonably, yeah, like this guy otherwise took this entire road trip because he had a baby out of wedlock with some girl that he barely knew once, and he had to tell this secret to everybody that he knew, and or his family, his closest family, and then like some people that he worked with. And then on top of that, like while she's calling him, and she's pregnant, and she's ultimately just saying like, tell me that you love me, like this really hurts and how much it hurts, and people are opening windows and he's just like, well, tell them to close the window, just like I know it really does hurt, but maybe get them to uh get them to give you medication, give you I'm assuming they'll probably give her like a the God, what is it called? The epidural. I'm assuming when or whatever it's called when it's the pregnant medication to help ease pregnancy. But I don't know if that exactly eases pregnancy. I don't think anything can ease pregnancy, to be brutally honest. Um, but anyways, so and all the while, like during this entire road trip, this guy is going through this journey of this woman that he barely knows, and she's wanting him to tell her that he loves her, and he can't do that because he's trying to make his other relationship work. But within this entire car ride, he's hearing about the complications of the birth, and he has to consent about how they're going to deliver this baby. And then by the end of the car ride, I'm just like, please tell me that this guy is going to end this movie at the hospital with the baby in his arms. But no. The way that this movie ends is that legitimately the guy is still on the road, and the woman is on the phone, and you hear the baby crying or the baby making noise, and that's how they end the movie. I'm like, oh, so you don't even get to see, so he doesn't even get to see like his this entire journey was him timing out to the minute of how long this this road was, how long. Like he was mentioning, it's only 45 minutes, and traffic is good, and this and that, and just believe me, I'll be there. Just believe me, I'll be there. Believe me, I will. I'll be there. And then at the very end of the movie, you don't see him in the hospital holding the child or anything like that. No, he's still on the road. And you hear the baby cry. And that is just like, oh man. So, like, he doesn't even make it. He doesn't even make it. Ah, that is so, like, it's kind of like disheartening, but then again, it's like, at the end of the day, the reason why this guy drove all the way in or drove all the way out here was for a baby to be presented in the world, and that he was going to try and be a good father and try to be a father to this son. And eventually, oh man, it would have been great if there was some kind of ending where he's just holding the baby in his arms, so that way there's some kind of completion to this. There is no pre backstory. It's just him in a car, and that's how it starts, and that's how it ends. Um, just a great thing overall. Even with them doing the entire thing with basically just Tom Hardy in a car, and everything is just uh, uh, phone called over. Um, yeah, it's just like this guy did not make it. The one thing that he was trying to succeed on is um making it to this birth of this child. But at the end of the day, he didn't even succeed in that. But he still figures that he's going to see the child regardless. And yeah, so because it's kind of interesting that this guy had to ultimately, like, I think this was maybe during a holiday, seems like. It sounds like a holiday. And like recently this guy had to otherwise miss this football game because ultimately he was going to um like, there is no way out of not telling his wife what was going on, which ultimately he was going to tell her anyways during this car drive. You would think he would have waited, like, before he went into the car to tell his wife, but instead he went in said car drive and told her during the car drive. So again, everything had to be done in car. And I think that is probably the most reason why I think his wife did leave him within this movie, is just that he didn't even take the time before going here to tell his wife what was going on. It would have been a much more interesting way if this guy had to, like, leave from his job to immediately be told that this girl's water had broke, to immediately going into this car to drive off. And that's how they could have started the movie. It's a little thing, it's a little tiny little thing, and it shouldn't matter, but it would just kind of add a little bit to the story. But anyways, yeah, I liked the movie. I enjoyed it, and ultimately that's overall what I felt about it. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.